is Patrick Maundu. I am an ethnobotanist. An ethnobotanist is someone who studies the relationship between plants and people. Ethno, for people, especially indigenous peoples, ethnic groups, and then botany, of course, the study of plants. What inspired me to study ethnobotany is the fact that as I was growing up, I saw my mother using lots of plants in the wild, especially for medicine, for small ailments. We never went to the hospital for that. She used herbal plants from the environment. And I remember my mother was very strict when it came to conservation of these plants. You wouldn't just go and cut or remove some of these plants from the environment without her really getting angry at you. She also used a lot of traditional vegetables from the wild, and also vegetables which came up spontaneously in our garden. And also we had lots of other vegetables. But when I went to high school, I noticed we only used cabbage, day in, day out. And also at the university, we used cabbage mainly as the main source of vegetable, sometimes the kale. So this sort of struck me as really a big shift from what I was used to. And of course, if you are used to eating these traditional vegetables and then you turn to cabbage, you see the big difference in terms of the sort of feeling you get. Throughout my life, I realized there was a trend. We were neglecting what originally was African, what originally was traditional. And there was this attitude that whatever was local, whatever was African, whatever was traditional, was sort of second-hand or occupied a second place in modern life. I noticed that, and then there was also this feeling that as we move forward, we were tending to limit the diversity of food which we get we bring into our plate. I can give you a very good example. Because of this notion that people should eat what is exotic, in the early 80s and 70s, late 70s, most of our traditional vegetables were sort of being narrowed down to 3 key vegetables, and that is the kale, what we call sukuma wiki, and then what we call spinach, and then what we call the cabbage, or the green cabbage. So in the 70s and 80s, we noticed that traditional vegetables were getting neglected, and there was sort of an attitude that they were not good enough, and therefore the trend was that whoever was using kales, what we call sukuma wiki, cabbages, the green cabbage, and also the Swiss chard, what we call spinach here, was somehow more advanced than the person who was using the traditional vegetables. And that notion continued, and it's something I think we inherited from our colonial times, because in those days, whatever was African, whatever was local, was not considered good enough. Even our mode of dressing, our cultural items, our food, our whatever, just name it. And therefore, that led to limiting, sort of a narrowing down of our choices, our food choices, not only traditional vegetables, but even the other foods. People sort of neglected what was theirs and sort of went to sort of what we call modern, what we can refer to as modern foods, which are not necessarily nutritious or good enough for us. And therefore, the National Museums of Kenya put together a project known as the Indigenous Food Plans Program. And that's where I joined in to sort of do coordination. That's how I joined the National Museums of Kenya. And then the first question was to understand the diversity of traditional foods in the country. And therefore, we went around the country, all over the country, documenting what was edible. And surprisingly enough, we came up with 850 species, traditional species of plants eaten by the 60+ ethnic groups in the country. And that was a surprise for us. The next step was to see among those 850, which ones were easy to promote, because of course they are neglected. But then how do you bring them back? And we thought traditional vegetables were really ideal, because traditional vegetables you can plant, grow, and within one season you harvest and you can sell and you can eat. Unlike fruits, which take 3, 4, 5 years before you see the fruit. There are specific regions where traditional vegetables are used to a greater extent than others, especially western part of Kenya, the Rift Valley, the Nyanza region, and the coastal region. And therefore, we concentrated a lot on those regions in terms of studying the local knowledge, preparation, recipes, within what I'm calling the Indigenous Food Plans Program. That program lasted three years. And by 1992, we had a good understanding of which species are used by which groups of people within the country. And then after understanding that, of course, it's very difficult to promote the entire 210 species. We had, of course, to prioritize. And therefore, in partnership with Biodiversity International, then by that time known as IPUGRI, International Plant Genetic Resources Institute, the Nairobi office, we started a program, a sort of a long-term program aimed at popularizing these neglected vegetables. And therefore, from 1995, we had a series of meetings. And in 96, we rolled out a program to study this in depth. We wanted to understand which ones are marketable, which ones are being marketed by the local people in various ways, even if it's in a small way. Because marketing is one indicator of value. Whatever is marketed is valuable. And then the other factor we wanted to understand is how they are prepared by the various groups. What is the nutritional value? What sort of, are they grown? And if they are found, collected from the wild, can they be cultivated? Those are the sort of questions we had. And with funding from various organizations, Biodiversity International, then known as IPUGRI, received a big grant to develop a big sub-Saharan African program, not only for Kenya, but also covering other countries. And I was involved in that, in its preparation. And then by the first phase, which lasted 95, 96, 97, up to 99, we published different sort of monographs of the different vegetables and their value, depending on the research which various institutions had conducted. I think by 2014, we sort of started seeing a change of attitude, starting with consumers and also retailers. So that's how traditional vegetables came back to our plate. By 2006, I think the process, the momentum was so much. We actually didn't need to promote the traditional vegetables. For local people and consumers to accept these traditional vegetables, some key things are important. The one is the nutritional aspect. The health aspect is really, really important, because more and more people are getting conscious of the fact that they need to eat healthy. And lucky enough, traditional vegetables, compared to what we were eating, the cabbage and the Swiss chard and the sukuma wiki, most of them are more nutritious. If you take something like the amaranth, what we call the terere, for example, and look at the nutritional profile, you realize that for many of the key elements, what I call limiting elements, which we don't eat enough of, like iron, like vitamin A, for most of the elements, the amaranth or the terere would have like tenfold that of the cabbage, for example. That means you need to eat 10 times the volume or the weight of cabbage to sort of get the same amount of nutrients as you're getting from managu, for example. And therefore, it's good to diversify diets, because what you get from this type is not necessarily what you get from the other type. And therefore, traditional vegetables provided that diversity which we are lacking originally in our diet. So dietary diversity is good, because it sort of enables you to get different minerals, different vitamins, different things from different vegetables. And for us to remain healthy, we need to grow food, healthy foods, not just food, healthy food. And traditional vegetables are really ideal for that. They are diverse. We have lots of them. You have managu, you have terere, you have mito, it's endless. Those 220, 210 species. And 17 of those, you can get seeds in locally. So we can grow those traditional vegetables now at our backyards. I see even in our smaller markets, many of these, you can find 6-7 species being sold. So, I mean, let's have a habit of buying those and preparing them at home, because they are healthy. And as I said, the more diversified our diet is, of course, the more nutritious it will tend to be, other than just limiting ourselves to 1 or 2 species.